Okay, today we are looking at Chapter 16, which is the technology of safety. We'll look at 16.1, which is how safety features work, and then we'll also look at 16.2, which looks at seat belts specifically. So, like we talked about last class, when one object hits another, the momentum of the faster, heavier object is transferred to the slower, lighter object. The occupants of the vehicles experience various forces as their velocities change and as momentum is transferred during a collision. So there are these safety features on vehicles that work to reduce the force of a crash. The force resulting from a collision will be smaller if the change in momentum occurs over a longer period of time. So that's the basic idea behind how these vehicle safety features are working. So basically, these safety features, they work to slow down the collision so that the occupants of the car experience less force and therefore fewer injuries. Crash test dummies. These are mannequins designed to behave like the human body during a collision. They're fitted with sensors to record data. So engineers, they use these crash test dummies to determine what will happen to people during a collision and then to determine how well the crumple zones work in the cars. So remember that these crumple zones, these are the parts of the car that are made of crushable metal or fiberglass. So like the hood, the doors, and the trunk. And these sections, they will crumple when the vehicle gets hit. So they slow down the collision felt by occupants, and they increase the time of the collision between the occupants and the interior of the vehicle, and therefore reducing the force experienced by the passengers. So it reduces the damage experienced by the passengers in the vehicle. So here in this diagram, we're looking at types of safety features. So crumple zone here and here, crumple zone here and here. These doors are also crumple zone. There's a roll cage, and there's these side impact beams as well. So roll cage up here and side impact beams here. Okay, so that keeps a rigid structure for the body of the car. And that rigid structure is protected by the crumple zones. Okay, types of safety features. So there are the restraining features. These hold the occupants in one place. They prevent people from hitting the dashboard, the windshield, the sides or roof of the car. And they prevent someone from being thrown out of the vehicle. They include things like seat belts, airbags, headrests, and child seats. There are also operational features. These operate all the time to keep you safe while driving. So things like the headlights, which allow the driver to see clearly and warn other drivers of a vehicle's approach. There are rear and side view mirrors to assist drivers in seeing all parts of the road. There is the tail and signal lights, which warn other drivers of changes in speed and direction. And then there's the brakes, allowing the vehicle to slow down safely. There's two types of structural features. There are the rigid features and then there's the crumple zones. So the rigid features, those include like the heavy frame, the roll cage, and the side impact beams in the doors. So these are built from materials that will not crumple or break under extreme pressure. So these are designed to protect the people inside from anything that may hit the car. Then there's the crumple zones. Those include the hood, the trunk, and the fenders. They may be completely crushed in a bad accident, but if the rigid frame stays intact, the cabin of the vehicle will keep the passenger safe. Okay, this is just comparing two vehicles. This is the 1967 Dodge Dart, and this is a modern car. So these were heavier, older cars. They had a lot of momentum when they got going, but in a collision, the heavy metal body of cars like this, they didn't absorb any of the impact. So whiplash, as well as serious injuries, like hitting the hard dashboard or hitting the steering wheel. And this is a modern car. So modern engineering designs, they use lighter, bendable materials like aluminum and fiberglass in the hood and the trunk. So therefore they can crumple in a collision. It's harder on the car, but it protects the people inside. All right, so these modern cars, they absorb much of the force of an impact by crushing, and that reduces the force of a collision and it protects the occupants. All right, this is just showing again that vehicles that crumpled, they absorbed a lot of force during a collision, so less damage done to the crash test dummies. So here again, the outer panels, they crumpled, but they protected the cabin of the wheel. So engineers are continuously building and testing better roll cages, making them of rigid materials. Therefore, there's a protective cage around the passengers. And then there's the side impact beams, which protect the occupants from collisions from the outside or from the sides. And then there's a beam throughout the dash, so the steering column and engine could not crush their way into the cabin as well. So constantly testing new materials and new methods. There are also road safety features. So here a scenario would be, imagine the amount of force behind a truck hitting a concrete barrier such as this one. And now we have, if it was a similar accident, but this time there are these crash cushion type structures here. So it'll protect the vehicle and the occupants because of these barriers. So there's many roads that have road safety features that will basically reduce the force of a collision by slowing the impulse. So a crash barrier or that crash cushion, for example, barrels that are filled with water or they might be filled with sand, they will crush or burst on impact. So again, it applies a slowing force to the vehicle without doing as much damage as if it was a solid barrier. There's also guardrails. These will bend. They won't break, but they will bend to lower the momentum of a vehicle and absorb the force of a collision. They'll also prevent the vehicle from rolling over or rebounding into traffic. Some guardrails are designed so that the entire section will snap off its post. If a vehicle hits any section of the railing head on, that will slow down the vehicle safely by again applying a consistent medium strength force. There's also light poles. They used to be immovable, and today's light poles, they're designed with shear pins and they'll snap off under the force of a collision. So the vehicle, if it hits the light post, it's not immediately stopped. It'll reduce the force of impact. Okay, the 16.1 questions are noted here. So next we are looking at 16.2, which is seat belts. All right, so the original seat belt, it was just a 2-point belt. It was also called a lap belt. So these held a person across the pelvis, right here, but they didn't stop the upper body from moving. So these seat belts, they were designed to hold the occupant in place by just securing the person to the seat with a strap placed across the pelvis. So those were the original seat belts. Then we have the modern seat belt. These are the 3-point or the shoulder harness. They're designed to help restrain the upper body. So going across the chest like this. So it's a vehicle seat belt designed to hold the occupant in place by securing the person to the seat with one strap placed across the pelvis and the other strap placed across the chest from pelvis to shoulder. So that's the modern 3-point belt or shoulder harness. How do seatbelts work? Well, first of all, if you're not wearing your seatbelt during a collision, your body would continue traveling at the same velocity the car was going before the collision. So the technology in seatbelts, the first is webbing. So seatbelt material is made up of thousands of thin strands of polyester or nylon, and this arrangement of fibers, it allows the belt to stretch from about 10 to 15% of its normal length during the collision. So that stretching, it allows the passenger to stop more gradually and feel a smaller force. There's also a retractor unit in the seatbelts. So inside the retractor portion of the seatbelt, there's a system that involves a pendulum and a ratchet. The ratchet maintains the tension in the webbing. That's why the belt is always snug against your body. By pulling gently on the webbing, you can reel out more of the belt. But if there's a sudden stop, the pendulum and the ratchet mechanism will swing forward, it'll lock a bar in place, and it prevents more webbing from coming out. So basically the seatbelt will lock, and here we can see that mechanism. Alright, so here's the seatbelt, there's the pendulum, the rod, and there's the ratchet, and it can continually move. So the belt webbing is attached to a retractor mechanism that uses a spring and spool to keep the webbing snug. And then if there's an accident, the ratchet and pendulum system will cause the seatbelt spool to lock when the car suddenly decelerates or suddenly stops. All right, so therefore more of the seatbelt cannot be brought out. There's also this 4-point seatbelts as well. They're used in, for example, racing. So they're called racing style or 4-point belts. And these belts restrain both shoulders. And so therefore distributing the force over more of the chest. It reduces stress on the ribs, heart, and lungs. So proper use of a 3-point seatbelt. So seatbelt misuse can be disastrous. So even in collisions within the speed limit, you can expect to experience a force of 6 times your body weight. So even if you were trying to brace against the dashboard for such an impact, your arms will be trying to hold back 6 times your own weight. So it's important to use seatbelts properly. So when you put the seatbelt on, look at where the straps cross the body. The 2 strongest parts of your body are the pelvis and upper chest. That's where the belt should cross. Make sure the belt is snug, otherwise your body will be thrown against it. If there's a hard stop against that narrow strap, it's like being hit by a flying brick. Make sure the diagonal portion is across your upper body. If you don't keep it across your upper body, then you're just back to a 2-point lap belt, which had all those problems in the beginning. When babies are born, they're basically moving from a liquid environment, which was the womb, to the outside world. So their bones do not have the strength of adult bones. They also have much larger heads by proportion than adults. So they need safety seats as well. So child restraints. The Canadian Automobile Association reports that up to 1/3 of Canadian children are not properly restrained while in a motor vehicle. That leads to as many 10,000 injuries per year. And remember that children have those weaker bones and muscles. They also have heavier heads. So devices for children are designed to provide extra protection. And the types of child seats, they differ based on the mass of the child. And it is recommended that children are at the back of the car. The back seat of the car is recommended for children because there's no dashboard to hit and there's no chance of injury from an airbag. All right, so these are just different types of car seats. This one's an infant only for children who can't sit up by themselves yet. They're supposed to face the back of the vehicle. So the force of a crash would be absorbed by the entire back of the child. Convertible child seats are used with children from birth to a mass of 18 kilograms. They can be used with infants and children. This looks like it's been placed in the front seat, which is not correct. They should be in the back seat. This is wrong. Children who weigh more than 9 kilos usually have bones and muscles strong enough for a child seat now. In this kind of child seat, the child faces forward, not backwards. But it's still recommended that it should be in the back seat, not in the front. And then there's booster seats for older children. So basically, they're not yet tall enough to use the seatbelt that comes with the vehicle. So this booster seat just puts them up to a height so that it's a raised position so that the seatbelt will cross the chest properly. All right, and we'll stop there. The 16.2 questions are noted here.